Thank you for sitting. Thank you. We begin the last session, and I have the pleasure to welcome Professor Mansoor Raza Mirza, who is Chief Oncologist of Copenhagen University Hospital, Medical Director of Nordic Society of Gynaecological Oncology, Chairman from 2020 to 2022 of ENGOT, European Network of Gynaecological Trial Groups, and Vice President of ESGO. He will tell us about treatments, and in particular, PARP inhibitors and immunotherapy. Welcome.
Thanks so much. And first of all, it's a privilege to be here. It's an honor to be here with you. And it's great that ENAGAGE and ENGOT, we are working so close together that we can arrange seminars and we can arrange education for you. And we can learn from you on the back when we are writing protocols. So I think this collaboration of ENAGAGE and ENGOT is extremely important. Right now I took the ENGOT hat. ESGO is our society, and we have a great collaboration that way as well. And I'm happy that we could convince Jalid from ENGOT side to work closely with you. I could not find a better person to ask, so I'm sure that is a great success as well. What I was asked to do was the major achievements of management of gynecological cancers in the past years, basically PARP inhibitors and immune therapy. Don't ask me any surgical questions, please. I'm not a surgeon. I think I love this slide for ovarian cancer. A decade ago, if I had a new patient, I was telling them, we can give you chemotherapy, you will have a good response, and you will not have progression for some time, but ultimately you will have relapse, and you will have chemotherapy again and again and again, but we cannot cure you, and you are going to die of this disease at some time. By end of 2010s and about 2017, 18, 19, when we had results of the first PARP inhibitors, I was convinced that this disease is now a chronic disease, that patients do not have to die of ovarian cancer. They can, and that was I was telling the patients. But now, after seeing the results of overall survival in first-line PARP inhibitor trials, I'm convinced that we are curing not just quite a few patients from ovarian cancer. So, in 10 years, we have completely changed the whole magnitude of disease. These are the three first-line which has completely changed the way we are treating patients from the very beginning, from the diagnosis, when they have got surgery and chemotherapy. And after that, we did these trials. In the maintenance setting, we randomized these patients to receive PARP inhibitors or placebo. In two of the trials, in one of the trials, PARP inhibitor plus bevacizumab versus bevacizumab. These are little bit different population, little bit different design, but results extremely positive, and we have a great outcome of these. We saw tremendous benefit in progression-free survival, extending the disease progression to so long that for example, in Solo 1, we have now data for 7 years, and 7 years, half of the patients have not progressed. Okay, 10 years ago, after 5 years, only 20% of patients were alive. We are not talking about not progressed. Alive. So it's a great achievement. If we see what we have seen a month ago in ESGO Congress was the overall. So we have seen the PFS data in 2000. We saw the data on overall survival. So a few things I would like to say. The patients who have received here olaparib for two years, this is the curves. This trial was done only in the BRCA mute population. These are the patients who received 2 years of. These are the patients who received 2 years of PARP inhibitor. It stopped here, and the other group received 2 years of placebo. That means nothing, right? Why the placebo group is doing so well? Let's take it first. This part. Why placebo? If you go 10 years part. Why placebo? If you go 10 years back, this curve should be down at 20%, because these patients, when they get relapse, they are crossed over and they receive PARP inhibitor, because PARP inhibitor is approved in the relapse disease. So most of these patients have this curve going down to 20%, as we saw the curves 10 years ago. It's up 45%. But if you have given PARP inhibitor, just 2 years of PARP inhibitor up front, you are up 67%. Another important thing, years of age, there could be other reasons. I mean, we cannot just survive forever. We have to die of something. And there could be other reasons to die of it. And you can see here, at 5 years, 73% overall survival, and at 7 years, it's 67%. It's like a plateau. You're not giving treatment, and that's not going really down. It is long from 50%. It's much higher. So this very small change is telling us, that yes, we have cured quite a few patients. Okay? Then we take the Paula trial. This trial was performed in the whole type, those who were HR deficient and HR proficient, so-called HRD positive and negative. And it never showed any benefit in the HRD negative disease. It only showed benefit in HRD positive disease. So that's half of the ovarian cancer patients. And if you look at the overall survival in the HRD positive disease, it could be BRCA mute or they could be BRCA wild type. So that's half of the patients. You can again see the same benefit. 65% are alive at 5 years against 48%. Again, this curve is much higher. Why? Because they are against 48%. Again, this curve is much higher. Why? Because they are receiving maintenance therapy at the time of relapse. They received placebo, but upon progression, they were receiving PARP inhibitor when they got relapse. So it's not again 20%, it's going higher up here. So again, you have overall survival has become much better. Again, 2 years of PARP inhibitors. PARP inhibitor, olaparib is given up to here. Bevacizumab even shorter. And then you see there is no serious, as I say, sometime when we are 100 years old, we will die of something. I'm happy that we will, otherwise we will be quite crowded here in but probably we have cured quite a few patients here. If we look at the subgroup analysis of this trial, here you have the BRCA mute population, here you have positive population, and as I said, here you have the HRD negative where you don't see any efficacy. But if you see these two, you will see overall survival benefit. Very clear overall survival benefit in both of them. Okay. My patients received niraparib for 3 years and then control against placebo. This trial has such a slow event rate of overall survival. That's what I'm saying. In other words, is patients are not dying. In other words, is patients are not dying in this trial. Fortunately, only 38% of the events has occurred if you take the whole placebo plus non-active treatment, and we had to wait for 60% event, that almost two-thirds of the patients would have died before we should look at the data. But we are not there, and we may not be there by 24 or even 25. So now we are discussing with the sponsor, could we do an interim analysis? We still need the data on OS. We can see that progression-free survival has plateaued all the way. And the good thing here is that the curve on the right has both BRCA mute and BRCA wild type, and within BRCA wild type, both and BRCA wild type, and within BRCA wild type, both HRD positive and HRD negative. So all patients are benefiting. The highest benefit is always in the BRCA mute, the moderate benefit in the HRD negative disease. But all patients are benefiting. So we would be seeing these data in future. I hope that we would be able to. Companies has agreed that they would like to do the data cutoff by end of this year and look at the data once again. Probably we will have about 45% of the events about overall survival. So in conclusion, I would say we have not seen such a benefit in overall survival in ovarian cancer for many years. For many years. Actually 30 years we haven't seen such benefit. Prevalence of ovarian cancer has increased considerably because patients live with disease and do not die. And I would say again that I believe we cure quite a few patients. That has given both in US and in Europe approval, according to the trial results, trial design and trial results, approval to prescribe PARP inhibitors. Approval is a little bit different, as I said, according to the results and the trial design. When it comes to niraparib, it's in all population. When it comes to olaparib plus bevacizumab, as Paula trial, about half of the population, which are BRCA mutant, BRCA wild type, but HRD positive. And when it comes to olaparib, but we have possibility to offer PARP inhibitors to all patients according to the European Medicines Agency. However, there are differences from country to country. What can be done? What is allowed? I will not go in details of that. This year we saw also results of 2 new trials, and that has only added to confirm what I have just said. So this trial was very similar to the PRIMA trial. With niraparib given, and the difference is this is Asian population. While this trial was done with the third PARP inhibitor, rucaparib, so the patients were randomized to rucaparib and BRCA mute, BRCA wild type, HRD positive, HRD negative. Both trials have, as I say, confirmed. I think most important here is because we were always discussing there is only one PRIMA trial which has shown moderate benefit in HRD negative disease. And these trials have shown, both of these trials, In HRD negative disease, this is the Asian population trial. You can see the difference. And this is the Athena trial in Europe and US. You can see the difference. Both of these, Athena trial in Europe and US, you can see the difference. Both of these have confirmed that there is a clear benefit of giving PARP inhibitors, here niraparib, here rucaparib, in HRD negative population, here rucaparib in HRD negative population. That is giving us some food for thought. Probably one of the major things is that the HRD test we have today, we have 3 different HRD tests, they're not good enough. They cannot separate responders gradient, and you just cut off at 42. So if you have a result of 41, sorry, we can't give you PARP inhibitor in Denmark at least, then you have to go to Sweden to get it. Or you go to 43, oh, we would love to give you, what's the difference between that? Then we can give you PARP inhibitor, work on getting new test. But there is, until that, it should be clear that we should give benefit of doubt. We cannot find the population which will not respond. And until we cannot do that, I believe that can also save the bevacizumab at the time of relapse. It is effective there. So this is what I wanted to say about ovarian cancer. Let's move down to endometrial cancer. Endometrial cancer, I call it Cinderella disease. Endometrial cancer, I call it Cinderella disease. It was forgotten. Until about almost 10 years ago, we saw the data, the so-called TCGA data, the Cancer Genome Atlas data, where when went to the thousands of patients and looked at their, molecular profiling and found out that this is not just the so-called 2 types of tumors, endometrioid and non-endometrioid. We called it type 1 and type 2 for last 100 years. Pathologists looked at it, it's type 1 or type 2, and that's it. No, it's a very heterogeneous, molecularly very heterogeneous disease. These patients here, 1/3 of the patients, have so many mutations that they are extremely susceptible to, where I would say poly has so much, it's so hyper mutated, so ultra mutated, that cells cannot survive themselves because it's completely messed up. So you don't have to do anything. So in stage 1 and 2, if you have poly mutation, you don't need any treatment for these patients because they just cannot survive because of this extremely mutated DNA. They cannot divide. Here, immunotherapy has extreme role, and I'll show you the results. Then you have this group, copy number high, they behave more like ovarian cancer. They are p53 mute, and we have to find different treatment techniques in that. And then you come with this blue group, which is copy number low. I call it everything put together, different mutations. So what we are doing now is we are trying to design trials. The best thing is that now we know what mutations we have, and we have drugs available for these mutations. So we can give targeted therapy to druggable targets. So our new trials, you will see, which are coming more and more, will not be for all patients. It will be, if you have this mutation, we can give this drug, test this drug. If you have that mutation, we will test that drug. So the future in endometrial cancer, it's amazing how we have moved. But it's not easy when you go to these small groups to convince pharma that we need to do a trial. I can give you a very bitter example. There is a mutation called PIK3CA. It's a very important but a small group of patients. About 20% of this group could be, or 15 to 20% would have this mutation. But there is that. And I convinced one that's a big pharma based in Switzerland. I convinced them to give me a grant and the drug so we can do the trial to show that we can improve the outcome of our patients if you have PIK3CA mutation. We worked hard for 1 year in NSGO, writing the protocol. We got the rest of the ENGOT with us to do the trial. Everything is ready. We were about to submit to the authorities and to ethics committees of different countries. They had a meeting with me at ESMO 1 month ago, where they told that they have reorganized the whole company, and they have also looked at which diseases they would like me that endometrial cancer is not the area they are going to go further. This is science, right? So now I have everything ready. Now I'm trying to see if I can convince other company who has PIK3CA, if we can still move it up with the idea, because this is the only way we can go. I'm discussing with another company because we saw results, amazing results in ESGO this year of a drug called TDXD in breast cancer. In breast cancer, in HER2 positive breast cancer or HER2 low breast cancer. And I think we have about 35% of the population who could benefit from that. Until now, I have a very positive response from the company, and I'm pretty confident that we would be able to bring that trial to our patients across the pond, US, Canada, Europe. I had several meetings since ESMO, and so fingers crossed. So this is how it's going to be. The new trials will be not in the whole population. There will be small populations coming up, okay? But what we have achieved until now, immune therapy has been here in endometrial cancer, the population which I showed, which were quite mutated. And if we look at that, the first trial which was done was with pembrolizumab, which showed that these are not randomized trials, the next two trials I'm showing you, that all patients received the drug if they had this mutation. So if received the drug, if they had this mutation. So if you had MSI high in a patient, they were offered at the time of relapse to receive it. And this we call waterfall plot. Well, what does that mean? That the tumor size, we measure the tumor and the size at 0 point. If tumor is shrinking, it's going down, it's going to minus. If tumor is increasing, progressing, the size becomes larger. So everything under this 0 is good. Everything above is bad. And you can think most of the patients are below. So this is a great result. And that has given in US and now also in EMA approval to use pembrolizumab for the patients who are MSI high. And the phase 3 trials are ongoing to confirm that. And the phase 3 trials are ongoing to confirm that. The largest trial we have in this population, again a non-randomized, called Garnet trial, is with dostarlimab. And here you have about 150 patients, more than 150 patients. And response rates are 150 patients, more than 150 patients. And response rates are 45%. I just want to tell what is the response rate in patients who have relapsed with in endometrial cancer with chemotherapy. They are about 7 to 10%. And here response rates are 45%, which is huge. Not only that, I think the most important is the patients who are responding, they have continuous response for a very long time. In chemotherapy, we see progression-free survival of 3.5 months. So, responding, the patients are progressing, half of them have progressed in 3.5 months. Here you see, here you have 6 months, 12 months, and on and on. So that is the reason that dostarlimab has received both in FDA and EMA approval to be given to patients who are biomarker positive. That means deficient in mismatch repair, MMR, or so-called MSI high. So it's rare that EMA is more conservative, that they give approval on a non-randomized trial. And we have also seen a combination of immune therapy where all patients were there, MSI high, which are the hot tumors, and MSS. And this is the first randomized trial of immune therapy we have seen in endometrial cancer until now, where we have seen that patients would benefit in progression-free survival, there was benefit in overall survival and in response rates, and has got approval of the treatment. The issue is that when you add this small molecule lenvatinib, this becomes very toxic. So we have to really work. This becomes very toxic. So we have to really work hard to convince, to explain the patients about toxicity, to prepare the staff, to give them medication. You can see here that 70% of the patients had to be dose reduced or pause the dose. 1/3 of the treatment due to toxicity. This is not an easy combination, but we have to prepare patients accordingly to do that. However, when you don't have other options and you see overall survival benefit, until now this is the best option, better. This is the long list of side effects: hypertension, diarrhea, hypothyroidism, nausea. These are the major issues with it. So all this has made us possible. This trial is done in patients who had relapsed and on chemotherapy and after that. Done in patients who had relapsed and on chemotherapy and after that. But we said, why we need to go and wait till they relapse? Why don't we push immune therapy up front? And there is a tsunami of trials, phase 3 trials, randomized phase 3 trials ongoing at the moment. Randomized phase 3 trials ongoing at the moment globally. And I will divide into 3 groups. One group is this one in the red box. That is asking a question: if you add immune therapy on top of chemotherapy, so these patients receive carboplatin paclitaxel, on top of that they receive immune therapy or placebo for 3 years. And there are these trials ongoing. All these trials have finished their recruitment. There are thousands of patients recruited, you can see here in these trials. And the first trial is this one, Ruby trial. You won't have the complete data in 5 weeks. You will just have an announcement if trial is positive, if it is negative, and has reached its goal. But the presentation will be in March. I think then the next trial which we will see in this one by end of next year is the Mango trial by Nicoletta, EN7. That's also the same idea. And these 2 trials will be later. This is purely US trial, and this is US and European. On top of that we are giving immune therapy to these patients, plus minus immune therapy. So they receive chemo plus immune therapy at the time of chemo, and they continue immune therapy for 3 years, right? So on top of that, if we can add PARP inhibitor, so that's immune therapy plus PARP inhibitor in the main, if we can have even better efficacy and outcome of the patients. And there are 2 trials who have completed their recruitment, the Ruby Part 2 and the Duo E, And I think it will be another 2 years before we see the results. I think it will be another 2 years before we see the results of these trials. It will take a little more time to get events. And then comes the most, I would call bold trials. That is why we need chemotherapy. Can't we just get rid of chemotherapy? Chemotherapy. Can't we just get rid of chemotherapy? So these three trials are asking question, chemotherapy versus no chemotherapy versus something else. The first one is a trial in whole population, which is chemotherapy versus this combination of pembrolizumab and lenvatinib, which you just saw the first phase 3 trial. It's a toxic combination, and it's quite bold because it's comparing to carboplatin paclitaxel in whole population. So we have to see how it reads out. We will the Ruby and Leap one together in March, or he may be a little bit delayed till ESGO. But we will see results. So these two trials, Ruby and Leap one, we will see the results at least in first half of next year. Then these two trials I love the most. These are only in the hot tumors, the MSI high population, 1/3 of the endometrial cancer. And the question is, can we give just pembrolizumab or dostarlimab alone versus chemotherapy? Pembrolizumab or dostarlimab alone versus chemotherapy. And I can put money on that. These will be positive, and we will get rid of chemotherapy there. I believe in it. So these are what I see are the best design we have produced. Biomarker driven only in the MSI high, 1/3 of the population, get rid of chemotherapy, give only immune therapy, which has not much toxicity. Let's go to cervical cancer, what we have achieved. Cervical cancer is the most devastating disease. We have dying of the disease every year. Maybe we don't see it in countries like Denmark, where I come from, because we have vaccination programs very well established. But as soon as you go there where people have to pay for vaccination themselves, or it's not very well how the numbers increase, or go to India or go to South America or Africa, it's a devastating disease. Because of lack of vaccination programs. So there, what we are trying to do is, early stage disease surgery is really good. And most of these patients will be cured. The problem is, as soon as you have locally advanced disease already in stage 1B2 and above, then you have chemoradiation, and we try to make it better. And here we have if we, before giving chemoradiation, if we start with chemotherapy and shrink the tumor and then give chemoradiation, if we will have a better efficacy. They are quite large trials. One is done by Gupta in India, and very well-planned trial, and one is done by UATC in Europe. Both trials showed negative results. But actually it was not as good, maybe even worse, to give chemotherapy first and delay chemoradiation. So we didn't come further on that. Then we said, okay, what about when we are finished with chemoradiation? Can we give some more chemotherapy and at the tail end and have a better outcome in the high-risk population? And first trial which was performed in Mexico, had added gemcitabine and showed a positive outcome. But that trial was criticized a lot because of the quality, because of the design, because lack of data, and it was agreed in our GCIG Gynaecological Cancer Intergroup that we need to ask this question in a more pure way, do our international trial, and our Australian colleagues together with Europe and US, performed this trial of 1,000 patients, that's why it's called Outback. It's Australian. Showed absolutely no benefit of giving more chemotherapy at the tail end after chemoradiation. So that was also a negative trial. Then we thought that these patients are also extremely sensitive to immune therapy, that we can add immune therapy on top of chemoradiation. Sensitive to immune therapy, that we can add immune therapy on top of chemoradiation and get results. Unfortunately, the first trial results we have seen are from CALA trial, this 2 weeks ago in New York, and it's negative. That addition of immune therapy to chemotherapy, but the way one has chosen the patients, the number of patients in the trial, we cannot do subgroup analysis. So we still believe that we have in Europe have been doing another trial, which is much larger trial. And we believe that with pembrolizumab, the drug here is durvalumab, which is PD-L1, scientifically maybe a positive outcome here in coming future next year. We will see the results by end next year of our trial, and I hope that we will see the outcome is better. But what has happened otherwise, we saw a tremendous benefit. We saw a tremendous benefit of immune therapy in the patients who relapse. So the patients who relapse, we have not much to offer. Right now, they receive cisplatin, paclitaxel, and bevacizumab. Quite than that, we have nothing. We had nothing. But first, Krish Tiwari presented the data last year in spring by giving these patients who had progressed on this triplet, giving these patients single agent immune therapy versus standard of care. What is standard of care? Whatever chemotherapy you want, take it. And that trial showed both progression-free survival benefit, better response, overall survival benefit, and better quality of life. Everything. And it is just last week have received EMA's positive opinion. So we will see this approved within 28 days from that, so in 2 weeks from now. So we will have a possibility to give cemiplimab to these patients. And in the last September, where the drug was pembrolizumab, but this is not just pembrolizumab. Our standard of care is platinum plus Taxol plus bevacizumab. So pembro was added on that, the fourth drug plus minus placebo or pembro. And again, it showed better response rates, better progression-free survival, better overall survival, and better quality of life for these patients. Everything was positive. This trial was presented in September. After 14 days, it got approval by FDA. So, questions? I think we have done a lot. We are changing these 3 diseases to more and more halfway. Peter?
You didn't mention the ovarian trial for...
Yes, I did not mention the ovarian trial. That is PARP after PARP. The thing is, that we gave everybody again PARP. I think what we have not considered before that is the biology. And biology is that probably PARP after PARP is not enough. That patients who have progressed on PARP, they should receive PARP again. The benefit was minimal. That was statistically significant, but it was 1.4 months, 1.7 months. Giving a drug to get 1.7 months is not good enough. So it is not enough, good enough. So it is not enough. We take it back that we haven't done our homework right before we planned the trial. we have to design much smarter trial. We have to understand the biology. There are patients who are getting BRCA reversion, so they are not by PARP and other things. So we are now trying to do the combinations to see if we can increase the efficacy. We have initial data with the triplet of giving PARP plus giving bevacizumab plus giving immune therapy. All three things together seems to be very effective in the patients with PARP, with the patients who have progressed. We have another trial running in 11 European countries called DOVAC trial, where we are combining PARP inhibitor plus immune therapy plus a cancer vaccine, and plus immune therapy plus a cancer vaccine, the idea is to make these tumor cells again susceptible to PARP inhibitor, so we get back the efficacy. So this is the unmet need. This is the area of efficacy. So this is the unmet need. This is the area we are working on. AREO was just I would say failed experiment because we didn't do our homework before we planned the trial, though. Yes, Haley?
Could you please explain to me what is BRCA wild type?
What is
BRCA wild type?
So we have in ovarian cancer or in breast cancer, we have some mutations in one of the genes. Very much possible that patient will get cancer. And either breast cancer or ovarian cancer and some other cancers as well, prostate cancer for that reason in men. And that further to the children because you get one of the half of the chromosome further to the children. So that's why about 25 to 30%, if patient has, if you take 100 patients with ovarian cancers, about 25-30% of the patients have this gene mutation. Population has such a high, this is just a concentration because they have already cancer, and then you see how many of them has BRCA gene mutation. And that means that these patients have a high risk to, or almost possible if it is germline BRCA mutation, have given it further to their children. And they have. So we have to do the family counseling and all that. And then you have those who do not have this mutation, which is BRCA wild type. That's 75 or 70% of the ovarian cancer population. And there other factors count. And there are so many population. And there other factors count. And there are so many factors. Our lifestyle, what we eat, how we live, and other mutations in the cells which may cause ovarian cancer or breast cancer. So that's why it's such ovarian cancer or breast cancer. So that's why it's such a huge difference of risk of cancer in the BRCA mutated patients that we call our population into divide two, BRCA wild type, which is 70%, and then BRCA mute, which are the percent, and then BRCA mute, which are the with mutation. Yes, please.
Thank you for your splendid overview. Thank you for your splendid overview. I was just curious about if you know anything about these developments for vulvarian and vaginal cancer, because we mentioned cervix, endometrial, and ovarian, but the vaginal.
Thank you. That is very important question. Vulvar cancer and vaginal cancer. Vulvar cancer, and even more rare is the vaginal cancer. We believe with the alterations we see in the cells, HPV dependent alterations in vulvar and vaginal cancer, that they behave like cervical cancer. And we try to develop the treatments. We will never get these big protocols to tell what is what because there's so few patients. So we try to develop the treatments taken mostly from cervical cancer and further. We have just finished revising our European guidelines in vulvar cancer. They will be published again soon. And again, cancer. Also, we have suggested that we could suggest immunotherapy to these patients because we will never get a high evidence from these very rare diseases, but we have to treat them. So we have produced guidelines and with best of our knowledge how the results of cervical cancer. Any further questions? Yes?
Yes, hello, please. I would like to know if there are any trials ongoing for other types of ovarian cancer, because I understand that serous ovarian cancer.
Yes. And another great question. When we are talking about ovarian cancer, we always think about those 85% of the patients who have high-grade serous or high-grade endometrioid. Yes, there are trials going on, separate trials on low-grade. We already have a very interesting on low-grade. We already have a very interesting drug available which has shown very positive effect. It was done by MD Anderson Cancer Center in US, and we can use that. For once I was surprised that our Regiones Lehrmittel Committee, it's something we have to apply for when you are not approved. They were very impressed, and we have no problem approving to give this drug to our patients. And even they said if we come up with a guideline and submit it, they will approve it. They will approve it as a general application. So I think that is great. We have germ cell tumors, others, and we are having trials, but normally the trials are performed these are cancer germ cell. So we try to derive data from there and do some trials, but not randomized trials because they are very rare diseases, but we try to get more and more evidence in these areas. But definitely, if you go to Eastern population, especially Japanese and Korean population, clear cell is a very high number. And in Singapore, they are really doing some very nice trials in clear cell cancer of ovarian.
Thank you, Professor Mirza. We can thank you for your really interesting speech on this revolution we are facing in gynecological cancer. And we hope to see that in a few years things will change again